inventing the future, Tesla, Einstein, the ether, and the birth of new physics. Now, the ancient Greeks knew that what they called ether was filling up all of the universe, space, because they did not believe space was empty, an empty void. This is on Humans Are Free. Nikola-Tesla is mostly regarded as a brilliant inventor, but he was also a physicist who studied in college courses such as analytical geometry, experimental physics, and even higher mathematics. In his early 1890s lectures at Columbia University, the Chicago World's Fair, and at Royal Societies in Paris and London, building on the ideas of Isaac Newton and Lord Kelvin, Tesla demonstrated and discussed the structure of atoms as being similar to solar systems and wave-like and particle-like aspects to what later became known as the photon. Colleagues he lectured before and corresponded with included many Nobel Prize winners like Wilhelm Röntgen, J.J. Thomson, Lord Rayleigh, Ernst Rutherford and Robert Millikan, and other scientists such as Elmer Sperry, Sir William Crookes, Sir Olive Lodge, Lord Kelvin, Heinrich Hertz, and Hermann von Helmholtz. And as far as I know, no standard text on the history of physics mentions Tesla, even though these ideas would lead to Nobel Prizes when they were further developed by Rutherford and Bohr. Bohr having to do with the solar system description of the atom with electrons orbiting the nucleus, and Einstein's discovery of the photoelectric effect, which was equivalent to Tesla's wave and particle-like description of light. However, another idea which Tesla discussed was abandoned by modern physicists, and that was the concept of the all-pervasive ether. This led to a number of key differences between Tesla's view of the world as compared to that of Albert Einstein. Einstein lived between 1879 and 1955. Tesla disagreed with the findings of Einstein's theory of relativity in a number of ways. As far back as the turn of the century, Tesla thought that he had intercepted cosmic rays emanating from the sun that attained velocities, quote, vastly exceeding that of light, end quote. In the last decade of his life, he also claimed that these cosmic rays could be harnessed to generate electrical power. Tesla also saw radioactivity as evidence of the material body absorbing energy as much as it was giving up. On a separate front, the inventor stated that the impulses transmitted from his turn-of-the-century Wardenclyffe wireless transmitting tower would also travel at velocities in excess of the speed of light. He likened the effect to the moon's shadow spreading over the Earth. It's very difficult to explicate the first two speculations concerning tachyonic, faster than light speed, tachyonic, faster than light speed, cosmic rays, and radioactivity. However, with regard to the third claim, this suggestion that he transmitted energy at speeds in excess of the speed of light can be discussed from a variety of points of view. As the Earth has a circumference of roughly 25,000 miles, and light travels at about 186,000 miles per second, one can see that it would take light approximately 1/7 of a second to circle the whole Earth. But does the Earth itself exist in its own realm that by the nature of its size transcends the speed of light? For example, does the North Pole interact and exist with the South Pole simultaneously? If so, in a sense, the theory of relativity is violated as nothing, accordingly, can travel faster than the speed of light, yet the Earth's very electromagnetic unity belies that theory. Taking this concept a step further, does the solar system or galaxy, when perceived as a functional unit, interact with itself in some way that by necessity makes a mockery of the speed of light? The galaxy, of course, is hundreds of thousands of light years long. In fact, when we look at photographs of galaxies, we are seeing entities that are hundreds of thousands of light years long. Certainly, these systems have an orthorotational stability, and/or angular momentum, which exists as a gestalt totality in a realm that easily transcends the speed of light and therefore, in that sense, violates relativity. Concrete proof that relativity can be violated can be found in George Gamow's watershed book, 30 Years That Shook Physics. Gamow, one of the founding fathers of quantum physics, tells us that in the mid-1920s, Good, Schmidt, and Uhlenbeck discovered not only that electrons were orthorotating, but also that they were spinning at 1.37 times the speed of light. So there they have electrons going faster than the speed of light. Gamow makes it clear that this discovery did not violate anything in quantum physics. What it violates was Einstein's principle that nothing could travel faster than the speed of light. Paul Adrian Dirac studied the problem following the footsteps of Hermann Minkowski, who used an imaginary number, I, the square root of -1, to be equivalent to the time coordinate in space-time equations. Dirac assigned the same number I to the electron spin, and this way he was able to combine relativity with quantum mechanics and won the Nobel Prize for the idea in the process, 1966. That was the upside. The downside was that the finding that elementary particle spins faster than the speed of light, as a matter of course, went the way of the passenger pigeon. No physicist talks about this anymore. What this means is that the entire evolution of the 20th and nascent 21st century physics is evolving, ignoring this key Schmidt and Uhlenbeck finding. The ramifications suggest that elementary particles, by their nature, interface dimensions. Because they are spinning faster than the speed of light, the idea is that they are drawing this energy from the ether, a pre-physical realm, and converting the energy into material form. Now, what's the structure of the ether? Quote, on a body as large as the sun, it would be impossible to project a disturbance of this kind, that is, radio broadcast to any considerable distance except along the surface. It might be inferred that I am alluding to the curvature of space supposed to exist according to the teachings of relativity, but nothing could be further from my mind. I hold that space cannot be curved for the simple reason that it can have no properties. It might as well be said that God has properties. He has not, but only attributes, and these are of our own making. Of properties we can only speak when dealing with matter filling the space. To say that in the presence of large bodies space becomes curved is equivalent to stating that something can act upon nothing. I, for one, refuse to subscribe to such a view. End quote. This is what Nikola-Tesla said. In Tesla's model, a force field would curve light around large bodies. Force field, like a magnetic field, for example, would curve light around large bodies. These ideas were related to Tesla's original theories on gravity, which do not seem to have ever been published, but can be ascertained by decoding related articles about Tesla's from 1930 to 1940s. They also coincide with some of the most recent theories on physics, gravity, and magnetism, which challenge Einstein's claim that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. E. Lerner, writing about magnetic whirlwinds in Science Digest in 1985, stated that magnetism is as fundamental as gravity. Citing the research and theories of plasma physics, A. Perrott of Los Alamos National Laboratory, Lerner noted, quote, astronomers using a radio telescope have observed filaments of gas arcing far above the galactic plane. These twisting spirals appear to be held together by a magnetic field, stretching across 500 light years. Such magnetic vortices may play a major role in the universe, as important as gravitation, end quote. Another key mystery where Tesla differs from Einstein involves the paradoxical findings of Michelson and Morley, who in 1887 tried to detect the ether by using two sets of mirrors pointing at each other and placed miles apart. One set was aimed at the direction the Earth was moving, and the other was set was aimed at right angles to the movement of the Earth, and it was hypothesized that if the ether existed, once an impulse was sent, there would be a difference in the return times of each set, yet no difference was found. Okay? It was hypothesized if the ether existed, once an impulse was sent, there would be a difference in the return time of each set, yet no difference was found. Einstein essentially agreed with the findings by stating that by its nature the ether could not be detected. However, Einstein also upped the ante considerably by also saying that if the ether could be detected, then his theory of relativity was in error. Einstein further stated that if light could travel like a particle, it would not need a medium, hence ether, to travel through. Even though most of the great scientists of the day, such as Maxwell, Faraday, Kelvin, Fitzgerald, and Lorentz, all accepted the obvious conclusion that there had to be a medium of transfer in space, hence ether, all of this was glossed over. This led to a generally accepted conclusion that the ether did not exist, and that is the situation today, a full century later. It would take Einstein 15 years before he addressed this glaring misconception, but the damage had already been done. In 1920, lecturing at the University of Leiden on the topic Ether and the Theory of Relativity, Einstein stated outright that the ether did exist, that it was necessary as a medium of transfer because light also had wave-like properties, and he even wrote Lorentz to clarify the point. But by now the damage, as we said, had been done. The lecture received little notice. It was ignored by Roland Clark's watershed biography on Einstein published in 1971, and so the 20th and the 21st centuries evolved in such a way to dismiss entirely ether theory. Since the Michelson-Morley experiment, light traveled at the same speed in the direction the Earth was moving and at right angles to the direction, Einstein concluded that the speed of light had to be constant according to the formulas of special relativity. He further suggested in 1905 that the ether of the 19th century physics was not necessary, although what he really meant to say was that it could not be detected. At the time it was a radical view. It was soon widely accepted, even though it implied that there was nothing between the stars. This concept quickly became dogma, as it helped solve a number of dilemmas. For instance, they no longer had to search for the ether because, according to the view, it didn't exist. Quote, Einstein did not disprove the existence of ether. He only stated in special relativity that, whether or not it existed, light would always travel at the same speed. From the perspective of popular science writers, belief in the non-existence of the ether remained alive, but in actuality, by 1916, Einstein had replaced the old ether in his theory of general relativity by curved space-time itself. Only this new ether is no longer a medium in three-dimensional Euclidean space, but in four-dimensional, non-Euclidean, curved space-time, end quote. It was this idea that was completely unacceptable to Tesla, and he criticized Einstein in the 1930s because of this. One area where they were in some agreement, however, had to do with the speculations of the German physicist Ernst Mach, making his ideas from monotheistic and Buddhist teaching, and from Isaac Newton, who suggested that all material bodies attract one another through gravity. Mach postulated that the mass of any material body, such as the Earth, was dependent upon some kind of gravitational force from all the stars. In other words, all effects in the universe were related to all others. Einstein wrote Mach to tell him that this idea was intrinsically related to his formula of the theory of relativity. I have yet to find a direct quote by Tesla of Mach's principle, but in an article Tesla wrote in 1915, clearly based upon his writings of 1893, he states exactly this position. Quote, There is no thing endowed with life, from man, who is enslaving the elements, to the nimblest creature in all this world that does not sway in turn. Whenever action is born from force, though it be infinitesimal, the cosmic balance is upset and universal motion results. End quote. It seems to me that the interconnectedness between all of the stars in the universe related to Einstein's curved space-times is the ether. Similarly, Tesla's view of the ether aligned itself with that of the Theosophists. Quote, long ago, I recognized that all the perceptible matter comes from a primary substance of a tenuity beyond conception filling all space, the akasa, or luminiferous ether, which is acted upon by the life-giving prana, or creative force, called into existence in never-ending cycles, all things and phenomena. The primary substance, thrown into infinitesimal worlds of prodigious velocity, becomes gross matter, the force subsiding. The motion ceases and matter disappears, reverting to the primary substance. End quote. Removing the spiritual component from akasa, Tesla postulated that everything in the universe derives its energy from external sources. This corresponds to his model of the automata, or remote-controlled robot, which received commands from the electrician and also of himself, that is, of the human condition itself. Denying the Platonic concept of intrinsic motivation as the Aristotelian, and thus a believer in the idea of the tabula rasa, Tesla assumed that all of his ideas came from external sources, even though, paradoxically, his life was the very essence and expression of self-determination and the power of the will. Each hierarchical entity in his system was not endowed with a soul, per se, but rather a self-directed electrical component which moved the attraction or the repulsion. As a non-physiologist, as a non-psychologist, Tesla also negated by necessity the concept of the unconscious, the archetypes, and also the Freudian id as primary motivators. So, for instance, a dream would always ultimately derive from some extrinsic factor, never from completely inner source. However, unlike Einstein, who negated the mental component from his model concerning the primary force of the universe, Tesla addressed this factor with his construction of the first prototype of a thinking machine, his teleautomation, or remote-controlled robot, which was in the form of a wireless-activated boat that the inventor displayed before the public at Madison Square Garden in 1898. In essence, for Tesla, the mind was at its basis a binary electrical system of attractions and repulsions stimulated from an outside source and wholly compatible with Pavlov's stimulus-response reflex model for cognitive processes. Smashing atoms. Tesla also differed with Einstein in the quantum physics in his view of the structure of the elementary particles and the possible consequences caused by the smashing of atoms. Quote, I have disintegrated atoms in my experiments with a high-potential vacuum tube, operating it with pressures ranging from 4 million to 18 million volts. But as to atomic energy, my experimental observations have shown that the process of disintegration is not accompanied by liberation of such energy as might be expected from present theories, he said. To Tesla, the theory of relativity was just, quote, a massive error and deceptive ideas violently opposed to the teaching of great men of science of the past and even to common sense. The theory wraps all these errors and fallacies and clothes them in magnificent mathematical garb which fascinates, dazzles, and makes people blind to the underlying error. The theory is like a beggar clothed in purple, whom ignorant people take for a king. Its exponents are very brilliant men, but they are metaphysicists rather than scientists. End quote. Writing a decade before the explosion of the atomic bomb and ignoring the space curvature data from the 1919 eclipse, which supported Einstein's idea that space was curved around large bodies such as stars, Tesla suggested that the existence of a force field would account for the same mathematical results. Thus Tesla brazenly concluded, quote, "Not a single one of the relativity propositions has been proven," end quote. It would be short-sighted to simply judge Tesla wrong and Einstein and the quantum physicists right for at least two reasons. One, both relativity and quantum theory have been established as incomplete and in some sense incompatible theories on the structure of the universe. Two, Tesla was discussing these phenomena from a different perspective that was not completely analogous to the one espoused by the theoretical physicists. And in Colorado Springs, for instance, Tesla was generating over 4 million volts, whereas only 1 million volts is required for separating electrons from the nucleus of an atom. Thus, Tesla was able to disintegrate atoms, but in an entirely different way than that postulated by Einstein or the quantum physicists, for Tesla did not destroy the nucleus. No atomic explosion could ever occur with his type of apparatus. Tesla completely misunderstood the ramification of Einstein's equation E equals mc2 and the corresponding suppositions of the equivalent of mass and energy. Unfortunately, he would never live to see the proof that tremendous amounts of power were locked inside the tiny space occupied by the nucleus of an atom. Gravity. Concerning the curvature of space, Einstein, versus the idea of the force field, Tesla, I discussed this point with Edwin Gora, Professor Emeritus from Providence College and Gora, whose teachers include Werner Heisenberg and Arnold Sommerfeld, agreed that the two concepts might actually be different variable ways of describing the same thing. Both Tesla and Einstein are trying to describe the fundamental structure of space and its relationship to the constancy of light speed and gravity. In an obscure paper I discovered on the web, published by M. Shapkin, but supposedly written by Tesla, Shapkin-Tesla states that the reason why light only travels at one speed, that is 186,000 miles per hour, is because the ether, its medium of transfer, slows down photonic energy to that rate the same way air slows down sound to its constant speed. Now, according to this view, the ether is a specific medium that restricts the speed of light to exactly the speed that it is. This is a very exciting theory because it suggests that the energy which manifests itself as light ultimately exists in a tachyonic realm, that is, in a realm that exceeds the speed of light. Another aspect of this ether theory, which derived from Tesla and numerous other modern writers such as Prince and Gibson, Ed Hatch, Vinceslav Bujic, Ron Heath, Warren York, and David Wilcox, outlined in detail in my book Transcending the Speed of Light, is that matter is constantly absorbing ether all the time. And if we look at the structure of matter, we see that it comprises of atoms, which is essentially electrons, orbiting protons, and neutrons. But neutrons are, by definition, protons sandwiched to electrons. So the fundamental structure of matter is just two particles, electrons and protons, and a glue that binds these atoms into molecules, which are photons. These particles spin, but what keeps them spinning? Ether theory suggests that elementary particles are absorbing ether all the time to maintain their spin. And when they do this, they emanate the absorbed energy as electromagnetic fields. That is the link between gravity and electromagnetism. Take the Earth, for instance. Classical physics sees the force of gravity as some type of almost magical attractive force between stars and planets. Ether theory has a totally different view. The reason we fall back to the Earth when we jump up is not this mystical force of gravity, but rather it is because the Earth is constantly absorbing a tremendous amount of ether to keep all of its elementary particles spinning. We are just in the way of this influx. This view explains what gravity is and also explains Tesla's seemingly odd statement that the sun is absorbing more energy than it's radiating. The more you think about it, the more this seemingly a seemingly nutty idea makes perfect sense. The sun requires a gargantuan amount of etheric energy to keep its integrity. Grand unification. Now we go to Einstein, who, as we learned from the new Isaacson biography, came to reject Mach's principle. Einstein did indeed see a connection between gravity and acceleration, but he was not ready to accept the etheric view, because to do so would mean to drive a stake through his precious theory of relativity. Remember, he said that if ether could be detected, then his theory is wrong. According to the etheric view, as espoused by various writers listed above, Prince and Gibbon et al., ether is easily detected. If you are driving in a car and accelerate greatly, you will feel a g-force. This is an increased absorption of ether. That's what a g-force is. Ether flowing into matter is gravity. Matter flowing rapidly through ether, that is acceleration, is experiencing a g-force. Einstein started to become aware of this in 1916, just as Louis de Broglie's wave mechanics was coming into vogue, where before that time physicists were looking at electrons and protons as particles. De Broglie emphasized the wave aspect of that nature, and looking at electrons as waves rather than particles makes it a lot easier to understand the quantum leap, or the shift of an electron from one orbit to another without going into an in-between state. From this de Broglie wave-like point of view, quantum leaps occur when electrons simply shift their point of focus. Once de Broglie began to gain acceptance, the elementary particles, included photons, were now looked at more from the wave point of view, and this view was more in accord with the necessity for an ether as a medium of transfer for light, for instance, to get from the sun to the earth. Initially, Einstein was still too caught up in his particle view, and in Mach's principle was suggesting that all matter in the universe was interdependent. Thus, concerning rotating bodies, Einstein would write the young mathematician Karl Schwarzschild, January 9, 1916, he said, "Inertia is simply an interaction between masses, not an effect in which space of itself is involved, separate from the observed mass." End quote. Schwarzschild, Isaacson points out, disagreed. Now, 4 years later, in 1920, after reconsidering the necessity of the ether, for instance, as a means to propagate light, Einstein changed his mind. He abandoned Mach's principle and now saw that a rotating body did not obtain its inertia from and relation to all the rest of the matter in the universe. Mach's principle, but on its own according, due simply to its state of rotation, because space is endowed with physical qualities. Because of the power of de Broglie's emphasis on particle wave theory, Einstein shifted gears to be current. Back ahead of the curve, he lectured on the ether at Leiden University. Einstein never came to view gravity as the absorption of ether by elementary particles, and electromagnetism as a product of this process. And because to do so would be to abandon relativity, Einstein also never was able to integrate gravity into his grand unification scheme, a problem he wrestled with for the entire last half of his life. And once it is realized that electrons spin at speeds in excess of the speed of light, a new paradigm is born. The idea simply is that the elementary particles, by their nature, are absorbing ether all the time, and this influx is what gravity is. As ether is absorbed, two things happen. One, process enables elementary particles to maintain their spin, and two, simultaneously the etheric energy, probably stemming from what some physicists call the zero-point energy realm, which is a vast reservoir of untapped energy, is transformed into electromagnetic energy. That is grand unification, Einstein's dream of how to combine gravity with electromagnetism. Tesla understood ether theory a lot better than Einstein did, but obviously Tesla did not truly understand the ramifications of Einstein's famous equation E equals mc2. He dismissed it as mathematical poppycock. Had he lived a few more years to see the explosion of the atomic bomb, Tesla would have been forced to reevaluate what he had discarded, and had Einstein reevaluated the full ramification of Tesla's ether theory, he may have been able to achieve his grand dream of unifying gravity with electromagnetism, a process explained by full understanding of ether theory. A large number of thinking physicists believe that the ether of sorts exists, and that forces of some type may transcend light speed. And once one begins to study ether theory, profound new insights concerning such things as particle spin, zero-point energy, the fundamental structure of matter and space, the constancy of light speed, and the link between gravity and electromagnetism begins to emerge. This is by Mac Seifer, PhD, New Dawn Magazine. The above is an excerpted and adapted with permission from Mark Seifer's book, Transcending the Speed of Light, Consciousness, Quantum Physics, and the Fifth Dimension, Inner Traditions, 2008. And this is on Humans Are Free by Alexander Light, and it's Creative Commons. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.